Marketer of the Day, episode 559, Interviews that Convert. Attract and convince your ideal target buyer. Master joint ventures. And up your networking game with Nicole Holland.
Hey everyone, and welcome back to the show. We're here with Nicole Holland, and Nicole is recognized internationally as the authority on podcast guesting, and she's also known as a catalyst who generates creative, out-of-the-box solutions for her clients, colleagues, and friends. She's been named in the Huffington Post as one of the 50 must-follow women entrepreneurs in 2017, and Nicole helps leading-edge thought leaders, authors, and entrepreneurs strategically increase their visibility, likability, and credibility in a way that works uniquely well for them. Lots of exciting stuff. Glad to be talking to you, Nicole.
I am so glad to be talking to you too, Robert. Thanks for having me.
Glad to have you, and glad to be talking to you in general. And yeah, so this whole subject of podcast guesting, I love it because I'm sort of a computer programmer guy, and I see so much of these really good tools being out there. I mean, in this day and age, it's easier than ever to have a podcast, get on podcasts, but then a lot of people have trouble using the tool that's right in front of them. So I think that it's great that you're helping people to get to where they need to go.
Thank you. Yeah, it's amazing. Like, I've loved being a podcaster for the last couple of years and watching the medium grow so much and so much innovation and, like you said, tools. And speaking of tools, we were supposed to have this interview on Skype, and for some reason that tool's not working for me. So I so appreciate your flexibility in playing with another one.
Well, heck yeah. And there's a really good lesson in there, is that we can't always be married to the tool that we're used to, because sometimes things change or sometimes there's a better solution. And I got to say that, like I said, usually my process is calling on Skype, but a few times every now and then I kind of have to, go with the flow like what we're doing here today. And I'm liking doing the interview on the Zoom room. I mean, even the audio quality is better on Skype, so I might even have to change my process. But the lesson for me there is, don't necessarily let technology get in the way, right? People are always geeking out about what software to use, what microphone to use. And it's like, well, if it's not working for you, change it, right?
Absolutely. And that's something that I definitely teach to my clients and students as well as guests, is that, you go with the flow, and whatever the podcast host says, basically go with that or better.
So along those lines, I probably do about one podcast interview a month, just whatever falls into my lap. And I've been wanting to step that up and play the game a little better, like that joint venture networking game. But then sometimes I get a little frustrated with a couple of things. And usually it's just when the host puts these hoops in front of me to jump through. And I'm talking about either they'll give me a big long questionnaire to fill out, and sometimes I just don't fill it out. And other times they'll say, well, can we meet ahead of time to do a pre-call, getting to know each other? So I'm curious about your opinion on those sorts of things. Are those worth going through as a podcast guest, or should we just be saying, forget it, I'm not doing this extra stuff, just meet me or not?
I love this question because these are two things that come up so frequently and are super frustrating. But I'm not sure if I don't think anybody's ever asked me about that on a podcast before. So the first and most important thing to keep in mind is it worth it for you? So assessing the show, like if this is a new show, and a lot of times new shows will actually put a whole lot of hoops because they've learned that from the people teaching them. So they'll put lots and lots of hoops that you have to jump through, and including the pre-call and all of this. And it's not oftentimes worth it unless it's a really, really specific show that you really want to be on. But also, those seasoned podcast hosts may put some hoops there. For example, I don't have lots of hoops to jump through, but I do have a form because there's specific things I want to make sure I get from my guests before I have them on my show. And so in order to get that, at the beginning I used to go back and forth with people, and now I don't go back and forth with them anymore because they put it up front. But if it's so difficult to get on the show, I do not generally book my clients for shows like that, and I don't book myself for shows like that unless it really, really is a perfect match.
Okay, fair enough. So it sounds like it's a judgment call, and it also sounds like maybe we should, as podcast guests, have that really high profile shoot for the moon sort of show that we want to be on.
Well, it's funny because it's not necessarily the high profile shoot for the moon that you want to be on. It's knowing what shows are your ideal buyers listening to. So being really, really clear on who do you want to reach and why do you want to reach them. So if you're looking at something, for example, from the perspective of joint venture, if you're thinking, I really want to get to know hosts who have an audience that they would love to share my services with, right? And then because it's a right fit, then it might be a different angle. You're looking for the hosts who you're going to have a phenomenal relationship with and who you are going to be likely to have good synergy with. And you want to get on those shows. And if it's that you want to find buyers for a service, then, or, if you're launching a book and you want to find readers for your book, then figuring out what shows they're listening to and being really clear on that. So it's, why do you want to be on the show? Being really intentional about the shows you want to guest on, and then making that judgment call from there in terms of if they give you a lot of hoops to jump through, say, how important is this to me to get to know this host and potentially have them as a partner or friend? Or how important is it for me to get in front of this audience? And yes, so that judgment will be very specific to each and every person.
Okay, great. So it sounds like we might have different goals, and we might be appearing on different podcasts for different reasons. Like it might be that if we're appearing on some podcasts with a lot of traffic, we say, well, I want to get a lot of buyers. But then if there's a maybe smaller or up and coming podcast, maybe it's more a matter of, I want to be friends with this host and get them to promote me as an affiliate. Is that on the right track?
It could be. It is very custom to each and every person. So when you start with your why, even before the why, what do you want to, what's your mission? What is your overarching desire for leveraging podcast interviews as a marketing strategy? And then why do you want to be on those shows? Once you figure out that overarching thing and you do the research to figure out what shows you should be on, identifying why you want to be on that show, and maybe even giving it a number. If you're doing a spreadsheet or something, you can give it a number of how important it is to you and for which purpose you want to be on there. But personally, I would rather be in a space, whether it's physically on a stage or whether it's a podcast, with 100 people who absolutely are looking for the value that I deliver, they're looking to solve the problem that my service solves. I would much rather be in front of 100 of those people who are looking for me than 10,000 people who are not looking for me and they're just looking for more general. So it's again, back to judgment call. It's about what's your mission? What's your desire? What do you want to get out of the effort? And acting accordingly. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm understanding you correctly, it sounds like it's quality over quantity. It's not necessarily a matter of, can I be on 100 shows or can I reach 1 million people? It's, am I the right fit for this show? And you'd rather be on a show with less traffic, smaller listenership, but they're looking exactly for you.
Yes. And not only am I a right fit for them, are they a right fit for me? So it's sort of like as we're building our business at the beginning stages, we're like, ooh, okay, I want to impress the potential client, right? We do all the things so that we attract and for lack of a better word, convince the target buyer that we're the right fit. And as we grow and we get more sophisticated and our business grows, the tables turn and we are looking for the right client. And so we're interviewing the client to see if they're a right fit for us rather than us interviewing for the client for them to make the choice. It's sort of like that too with podcast guesting. It's looking at, not am I a right fit for the show, but is the show a right fit for me? And that, again, will be based on your own goals. Is it that you want to find a potential promotional partner, somebody that's going to be able to support you, introduce you to other people? Is it that you want to get access to their audience? What is it? But it's how to, are they a right fit for me? But it's also giving value, right? I don't want to leave that out. I don't do this in a manipulative way. I do this in a way of how can I provide value to the people who actually want it, rather than, the throwing spaghetti at the wall, trying to get out to everyone, and something will stick eventually. I just don't believe in that kind of, personally, I don't believe in that kind of marketing for myself anymore.
It sounds like an uphill battle doing that anyway, it's like you have to fight two different things. First, it's like you have to convince them that they need this thing you're offering, and then get more into the detail of why you specifically. It makes a lot more sense to sort of start on step 2 already, where they're already convinced that they need to guest on podcasts. They're already convinced they need LinkedIn ads or whatever it is. And then that way it's like you're talking to a more open audience, it sounds like. And so when you're trying to figure out what sorts of shows to appear on or to help your clients appear on, what's that research process like? Is it a matter of going down the iTunes list or doing some searches or looking at other podcasts that your guests appeared on and then filtering it based on some of those questions you just said? Or how does a person begin to make sense of just all the hundreds of thousands of podcasts out there, and how do we narrow down which are the right fit for us?
Great question. And yes, there's all the things. I do want to say before I answer that the research piece is the most important piece, in my opinion, for effectively converting listeners to leads and hosts to raving fans. To actually be making money from your efforts, if you're not doing, a lot of people, they don't want to do the research. I'm going to get out there, and it's all going to work. But the truth is, if you don't spend the majority of that time in the planning process, just like, when you're dealing again with a prospect in a sales situation, you need to spend time understanding what they want rather than what you want, so that you can propose something that they're already desiring, right? It's the same thing with this. So the research piece takes a lot of time. It takes a lot of energy, and it will, in the end, save you so much time and energy. So you're focusing really on the thing that moves the needle forward, rather than spending a lot of time interviewing on shows that are not going to. So some of the things, so first of all, I recommend starting a spreadsheet. And when you're researching, yes, you can go through iTunes, but be really specific. Use keywords, right? You can use the search in iTunes and search for the keywords that your ideal buyer would be searching for when they have a problem. You can do that on Google as well, but I like to start on iTunes just because iTunes, really, it's all podcasts. So search for those things. And also you can find your competitors or complementary practitioners to search for them, and you can follow the leader. However, be careful with that, because most people don't have a strategy. Most people are guesting on shows that are not necessarily the right best fit for them. So you can start there if you want, but I just take the time really to focus on who am I trying to reach? And another thing is, if you know who you're trying to reach, there's Facebook groups, there's LinkedIn groups, there's ways of figuring out and engaging with people to say, and also your buyers, your customers and clients already, even emailing them and letting them know, or, again, on social media or whatever, letting them know specifically them, not just anybody in the world, but those people specifically, to say, I am looking to grow my reach through podcast guesting, and I want to know what shows you love to listen to. right? And then you're going to get information from the people who are your potential clients or are your already clients to find out what are they listening to. I also recommend staying open. A lot of people take the angle of, I'm an entrepreneur, so I am going to be on entrepreneur podcasts, but they're the people that you're trying to reach are whole people, right? So when you take a holistic approach, you want to consider that they may not be listening to podcasts when they're not working. They may not be listening to entrepreneurial podcasts when they're not working, but they may be parents, they may be religious, they may be whatever. And so taking the approach of looking into different niches where they have interview-based shows and looking at yourself and saying, what are my interests? What are my hobbies? What is my religion? And seeing if a show in that area might be a fit for you, that could be a really interesting way as well. Does that make sense? I don't know if I worded that in the best way.
Yeah, I mean, not only does that make sense, but those are some really great ideas. I mean, there are like 3 or 4 really great strategies that we should all be using just to go after that low-hanging fruit, our close connections, from thinking outside the box. And what comes to mind for that is I have a coaching client who is a doctor, and he's kind of specializes in like the plastic surgery, sexual enhancement sort of stuff. And he has a podcast where he interviewed a porn star just because that sort of fits, even though you normally think, well, he's a doctor, he's going to interview other doctors. And even on this show, even though a lot of the times I talk about marketing and entrepreneurship, I've had real estate people on, I've had parenting on, and I've had someone who helps with like drawing, sketching therapy. And we always make it work from things like, well, if you made money from your online business, you're going to want to invest that money into real estate. Or if you're building this online business, you're going to want to make sure that your family doesn't suffer. So that totally makes a lot of sense as far as thinking outside the box and not just necessarily pigeonholing yourself and saying, well, I'm in this niche, I'm only going to go after podcasts in this niche. It could be fun to play with that. And I love the idea that you threw out there of asking your subscribers about what shows they listen to, because, I mean, if you think about it, it's like, you're not the only game in town, right? Someone's listening to your podcast or checking out your products. They probably listen to other podcasts. And so if they like you, if you're a fit for their personality and the things they want to know, and they also like someone else, then it makes total sense that the opposite would be true as well, right? It's like if you say, well, what podcast do you listen to? And if they say, well, I listen to, Pat Flynn or Tim Ferriss or something, then you could say, oh, well, if A goes to B, then B also goes to A, right? And yeah. And then so something I want to make sure that we fit in here is I like the idea that you threw out there of when you're looking for these shows that you want to present like a topic and come to them with things about what they want and not necessarily what you want. And that seems to be like the ultimate marketing lesson, right? Is don't just necessarily put out things that interest you, respond to the marketplace, and whether that's, content itself or your products or guest blog posting or your books or whatever, make it a reaction to what the marketplace demand is, not just for what you're thinking up. So do you have any kind of interesting stories or case studies like that where when you were trying to find a good fit on a podcast for one of your clients and you had to maybe tweak things a little bit to make it fit according to what they wanted, not necessarily what you were originally presenting?
Absolutely. I can't even think of a specific example right now because it happens every day, all the time, because it really is relationship based. So what I do differently than most people who focus on podcast bookings is that I take a long-term relationship approach. So I look for hosts and then I actually ask them for permission to pitch before I even pitch. Most people will send out cold pitches and say, here's all about me, blah, 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 blah. Go here for more information and I'd love to be on your show. I don't find, as a podcaster, I don't find that enjoyable to receive. And so I don't do that. What I do instead is find hosts that I think are going to be great partners for me. And like you mentioned before, like people that are similar to you. What I find is that the clients that I work with have similar personalities to me. They also like the kinds of shows in flow that I like, And so I look for hosts that I can develop a relationship with, so that when I have clients that could be a right fit, I ask them like, hey, are you accepting pitches right now? And then if they say yes, great. Then I can say, I've got a client who blah, blah, blah. Is this interesting to you? I'm happy to share more information if so. Or if they say no, great. Is there a better time or whatever? So I ask for permission first. And so that's an actual dialogue. It's not just throwing something at them. So I have all different ideas based on my individual clients and based on the hosts that I know, or, if I'm going for a cold pitch, it's similar, but it's based on my clients and how I want to position them and why I think it's going to be a great fit. Once they give me permission to pitch them, then I say, here's why. Here's who I've got, and here's why I think it's going to be a great fit. And then they're like, ooh, yes, who is this person? I need to know more. So I intrigue them with the angle before I even tell them the person. Does that make sense?
It does, and I like that a lot. It's more of the gentler touch, and that right there, that sort of doing the, I guess you could call it like a test close, or asking the leading questions to get to where you want to go. I mean, I've just been noticing that more and more in a lot of people's webinar presentations in general, but it applies with, any kind of pitching like what you're doing with the cold email, in that it's tempting and it's easy to say, well, here's my stuff, direct approach, blah, and blast it all out. But if you kind of ask for permission first and get them a little intrigued, then the offer you have for them kind of comes from the perspective of, well, you asked first, they made that little micro commitment, and then you move on from there. So I love that a lot, where you ask the podcast host if they're accepting pitches right now, and then if they say yes, and you say, well, here's what I've got, and here's why they'll be a great fit. So that way it's customized. It's not just blasting out. I know that we have a hard stop coming in a couple minutes, so I think we only have time for kind of one last question here, and then we'll get to how people can find out about you and your service. So one thing that's been just really on my mind as someone who I've been upping my game with guesting on podcasts a little bit more. I have a one sheet, I have a bio, but how important is this one sheet, and how important is this bio sort of thing? Do we have to have one that's always up to date or really great, or can we get by with just a bio on its own? Or how important is this sort of concept with podcast guesting that seems to hold a lot of people up?
Great question. And I'm going to give you my opinion, and everybody's got their own. But as a podcast host myself, what I don't enjoy is getting PDF one sheets. They're very difficult to get. If you want to copy and paste something, for example, oftentimes the formatting is funky and you got to go back and clean it up. Oftentimes they're out of date and people say, oh, I've got a new thing. So it's just a lot more back and forth. Personally, I advocate for having a podcast guest profile page on your website. You can do it hidden, or you can use Google Docs for it. And that way you can keep it up to date all the time. So it's most relevant when the person who is looking at it is looking there, and it's dynamic. So you can actually have clickable links rather than just information. I like to treat people the way I want to be treated, and my time is precious. So I don't have time to be going through and reading a whole bunch of stuff and then like copying and pasting and looking. And I love to go to a page like the ones that I create for my clients, where it's like, here's a picture of them, here's a quick little blurb and links to all their stuff. And then when you scroll down, I put more information. I put links to podcasts they've been on, so the person vetting them doesn't have to go search for them in iTunes, but they're right there. And then just highlighting them on that. So that's what I recommend instead of a one sheet. And then I like to offer a host prep sheet like you received from me, which has links and Skype ID and all the stuff that you could potentially need as a host to vet, or not to vet, but to prepare for the interview, right? If I have a client who is an author, I like to give a preview of the book that they have to the host. Anything that's relevant to the interview or could be potentially relevant, I like to provide in advance of having to be asked.
Well, super great. Well, you've given us a ton of ideas for what we need to do to up our game with our guesting on podcasts. I love the prep sheet. Like we said, when we couldn't get in contact right away on Skype, I opened up your prep sheet, found the Zoom room to join, found the phone number to call, and that way we were able to connect anyway. So, I mean, that's a great alternative looking at it compared to that one sheet. And I'm sure that people are getting all kinds of ideas for what they can do, but they might be thinking, well, all these kind of scattered ideas are one thing, but to have an actual system, to have an actual coach, to have someone do things for me is even better. So can you tell us about your service and the thing that you provide so that way people can actually get some traction with this podcast guesting thing and so it's not just a dream?
Absolutely. And Robert, before I do, I just want to thank you so much. I'm so sorry that it was so short, and we will definitely need to connect again. And thank you to everybody who's been listening. I hope that you guys have got a lot of tips and things that are going to be really helpful for you. If you'd like to connect further and learn more about the services that I offer, you can go ahead and visit interviewsthatconvert.com. And at the time of recording, the website's down, and it probably will be down for a while longer, to be honest. But where it's down and it says, hey, we're closed for renovations, you've got links to my social, to my email, just hit me up. I love connecting with people personally. And so I've kind of gotten away from the automated and service menu kind of thing. And I really want to get to know you. I'd love to know what your takeaways from this episode were and how I might be able to serve and support you. So again, that's interviewsthatconvert.com, and make sure you let me know that you came from Robert.
Fantastic. So you heard it. You know where to go. That's interviewsthatconvert.com. If you're at all interested in getting more traffic, more traction, more attention to your online business, which you should, then forget about trying to play around with Facebook stuff or Twitter stuff. That's important. But to get the biggest bang for your buck, to get a lot of results fast, get guested on these podcasts and reach out to Nicole at interviewsthatconvert.com, and we'll see you there. And thanks, Nicole, for stopping by and sharing all this great stuff with us.
Thank you so much.
Please follow me on Twitter at twitter.com/Robert Plank. That's twitter.com/Robert Plank. And while you're adding me, also like Marketer of the Day on Facebook by going to facebook.com/Robert Plank Show.